Hello, everyone, and welcome to When We Were Young. This is a series where we dive deep into fandom and pop culture from the early 2000s for a little shot of nostalgia. My name is Kim, and I'll be your host as we travel down memory lane. Today, we'll be discussing one of the biggest names in the emo music genre, My Chemical Romance. So, welcome to my new series where I stand and talk at you for about 30 minutes about my latest nostalgic fixation. Today, I'm wearing a wig, and tomorrow, the world. Also, I have a microphone now. Look, Mom, I'm a real YouTuber. Like and subscribe for this new era of effort. So here's the breakdown of the video. First, we're going to discuss the key players of this story, just in case you're unfamiliar. We're going to talk about their humble beginnings and all of the wonderful records that they've produced. We'll move on a little later to discussing their side projects and their solo projects. And finally, in the end, we're going to talk about my personal experience with the band as well as hear from another fan. So let's start where it all began, with Gerard Way. He is the founder and the lead singer of the band. Then we have Mikey Way. He's Gerard's brother and also he plays the bass in the band. Then we have Ray Toro. He is the lead guitarist. Matt Pelletier. He was the first drummer of the band, followed by Bob Breyer, the second official drummer of the band. And finally, we have Frank Iero. He is the rhythm guitarist of the band. Okay, so it's September 11th, 2001, and Gerard Way is on his way to work as an intern at Cartoon Network. He'd actually pitched a show called The Breakfast Monkey with co-creator Joe Boyle, but they'd ultimately passed on the project due to it being too similar to other Cartoon Network shows at the time. I don't know if you know this, but a little something called 9/11 happened on 9/11, and it kind of ruined things for America. Plane travel was never the same. Country music got so much worse, and American nationalism was at an all-time high. But it wasn't all bad news because Gerard Way was there, and he witnessed the event from a ferry on his way from New Jersey, where he lived, to New York City, where he worked. So he saw this horrific event unfold, and he, like a lot of the country, were like, oh my God, what the heck? That was crazy. What am I doing with my life? Life is so short. I am wasting it being an intern at a company that doesn't even appreciate me when I should be out there changing the world. So, on 9/12/2001, Gerard Way made some phone calls, and the rest is history. But let's step back for a second and talk about the band members. Gerard Way was born April 9th, 1977 in Summit, New Jersey. It was actually his grandmother, Elena, who inspired him to pursue his creative endeavors, even encouraging him to join his fourth grade musical where he sang publicly for the first time as Peter Pan. At the age of 15, Gerard was held up at gunpoint. He said he was put on the floor execution style with a gun held to his head. It definitely helped shape his point of view and outlook on the world, saying, quote, "No matter how ugly the world gets or how stupid it shows me it is, I still have faith in it." End quote. Gerard joined a couple of short-lived bands growing up, like Ray Gun Jones and Nancy Drew, with future MCR bandmate Ray Toro. But eventually, he was kicked out of those bands, and he decided to pursue his career in art. That's, of course, not to say that he hadn't already been working on his art prior to starting the band. In 1993, at age 16, Gerard took his first swing at writing a comic book series called On Raven's Wings. It was published by Boneyard Press, but it was canceled after just 2 issues. And then, of course, in 2001, Gerard co-created The Breakfast Monkey, which was turned down by Cartoon Network, which brings us back to 9/11 and the phone call that brought MCR together in the first place. Ray Toro was born July 15th, 1977 in Kearney, New Jersey. In high school, his brother introduced him to several bands whose guitarists influenced him, and he was soon enrolled in guitar lessons. He joined several local bands growing up. One was called the Rodneys, and it was through that band's frontman, Sean Dillon, that he was introduced to Gerard Way in the late 90s. Now, playing in a band was not Ray's biggest pursuit. He actually graduated from college at William Patterson University and majored in film instead of music. He is quoted saying, "Being in a band wasn't really a dream of mine. I always wanted to write music. I never thought that being in a touring band was a possibility." Despite that, Toro took the call on September 12, 2001 and agreed to join the band with Gerard and Matt Pellissier. Matt was the original drummer for the band. Born March 16th, 1977 in Harrison, New Jersey, Matt played in plenty of Jersey bands growing up, just like Gerard and Ray. As a matter of fact, he was a member of the Rodneys, which, if you remember, so was Ray Toro, so that's how they know each other. More importantly, he had recording equipment in his attic, which allowed the band to record the original demos, affectionately called the Attic Demos. The Attic Demos consisted of Skylines and Turnstiles, Cubicles, and Our Lady of Sorrows, all of which ended up on their debut album, Bullets. With the recording of the Attic Demos, Mikey Way, Gerard's younger brother, dropped out of college to join the band as the bassist. Mikey Way was born September 10th, 1980, in Newark, New Jersey. Like Gerard, Mikey grew up listening to bands like the Ramones, Queen, Smashing Pumpkins. It was actually the Smashing Pumpkins was their first concert that he ever went to with his brother Gerard, and after seeing them perform live, he told Gerard, "We have to do this." He was asked to join the band, who at the time did not have a name. According to other band members, Mikey is actually very good at coming up with band names, and he's actually the one who came up with My Chemical Romance. The story goes he was working at Barnes & Noble at the time, and he had seen a book by Irvine Welsh called Ecstasy: 3 Tales of Chemical Romance. He added the "my" to make it more personal, and the next thing you know, My Chemical Romance was born. The band was quickly signed to Eyeball Records, a small indie label in New Jersey at the time. Also on the label, bands like Thursday, Murder by Death, and Pensy Prep. Pensy Prep was a punk band from New Jersey who was led by guitarist and frontman Frank Iero. He was a big fan of My Chemical Romance Attic Demos, and being a label mate, he would go to their shows for support. When Pensy Prep broke up, he was invited to join MCR as their rhythm guitarist. Frank was born on October 31st, 1981 in Belleville, New Jersey. His parents split when he was young, and he lived with his mother, who lent out her basement for her son's many bands to practice in. He started playing in local bands as early as 11 years old. It was his father and grandfather who influenced him into music, and though he was originally taught to play the drums, it was the guitar that he ended up playing the most. While he joined MCR fairly early in the game, he was only featured on 2 of the tracks on their first album, Honey, This Mirror Isn't Big Enough for the Two of Us, and Early Sunsets Over Monroeville. Finally, we have Bob Breyer, born December 31st in 1979 in Chicago, Illinois. He was the band's second drummer, replacing Matt. Bob joined just after MCR's second album, Revenge, was released, so he didn't feature on that album at all, but he did take over all of the touring for it and later recorded on the Black Parade as part of the band. He played drums from a young age, performing in his high school's marching and jazz bands. After high school graduation, Bob studied for a degree in sound engineering at the University of Florida. It was in 2000 that Bob began working as a touring sound engineer for bands like The Used and Thrice. In 2004, The Used was touring in Japan with My Chemical Romance, which is where Bob was introduced to the members and eventually took over as drummer. He didn't stick it all the way through the run of the band, though, however, choosing to part ways with My Chemical Romance in 2010, but we will get into that a little later. Now let's talk albums, shall we? Starting in July 2002, MCR released their first studio album, I Brought You My Bullets, You Brought Me Your Love, or Bullets. I do not have time for all of those words, okay? Recorded in New Windsor, New York, Bullets was released on Eyeball Records and produced by Thursday's Jeff Rickley. The overall sound of the album can be categorized as emo, post-hardcore, screamo, pop punk. Any sort of hardcore genre can really fit it pretty well. It is widely believed amongst fans to be a concept album about a Bonnie and Clyde type character who end up gunned down at the end of the album in the song Demolition Lovers. The concept was never confirmed by the band, but you know how fans like to speculate. One of the songs featured on the album is called Skylines and Turnstiles, and it was one of the first songs that Gerard actually wrote for the band, and it's all about, you guessed it, 9/11. Critically, the album was received okay. According to albumoftheyear.org, critics gave it a 63, while the user score was 68. So it's not the greatest reception, but it was good enough at the time to garner the attention of the scene. In promotion of the album, the band played venues and bars in New Jersey and New York City, opening for bands like Thursday, Taking Back Sunday, and Every Time I Die. This helped put My Chemical Romance on the map in the hardcore and emo scenes, and it also created some long-lasting and not so long-lasting friendships. MCR's sophomore album, 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge, or Revenge, was released in June 2004. This was their first album released on a major label. As about a year after Bullets came out, they left Eyeball Records in favor of Reprise Records. Fun fact, Reprise Records was founded by Frank Sinatra in 1960. It's also home to other bands like Green Day, Disturbed, and Deftones. Revenge was recorded in Calabasas, California, and produced by Howard Benson. In their documentary Life on the Murder Scene, the guys have said working with Howard really helped them mature in their performance. He'd give them a lot of pushback on their decisions, and that ultimately ended up creating a wonderful little album. You can watch Life on the Murder Scene in full on YouTube. I'm going to link it below. It's a great look into their lives during this era of the band. This was the final contribution of the original drummer, Matt. There is no official reason given as to why Matt and the band parted ways, but there are some allegations of arson involving a tour van, so probably for the best. Musically, Revenge has best been described as emo, alternative rock, pop punk. Gerard himself has said that while Bullets was the band finding themselves, Revenge is the band. Once again, some fans consider Revenge to be a concept album. As a matter of fact, they consider it to be a part 2 to the Bullets story, where at the end of Bullets, the couple gets separated by death in a gunfight. Revenge is the story of a man trying to get his lover back by any means necessary. Now, it's not confirmed, but it is a very interesting way to look at both of these albums overall. YouTuber Windigoon has a couple of very good videos on the concepts of these albums, and I'll link them below if you haven't already checked them out. Albumoftheyear.org gives Revenge a critic score of 77 and a user score of 85. Much, much better than their debut albums. Personally, I think Revenge is a no-skip album, but that's just my opinion. With singles like I'm Not Okay and Helena, this album helped shoot the band to new levels of appreciation and fame. They went to play on Warped Tour 2004-2005, Taste of Chaos with The Used, and they opened for Green Day's American Idiot Tour. My Chemical Romance third behemoth of an album is called The Black Parade. Released October 2006, a perfect Halloween time record. The Black Parade was recorded in Burbank, California, and produced by Rob Cavallo. The Black Parade is considered a rock opera and a concept album about a dying character with cancer known as the Patient. The album tells the story of his apparent death, his experiences in the afterlife, and the subsequent reflections on his life. Gerard has said it was heavily influenced by Queen, Pink Floyd's The Wall, David Bowie's Ziggy Stardust, as well as Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band by the Beatles. Their black uniforms, created by longtime Tim Burton collaborator Colleen Atwood, mirror the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's era, if a little darker than the inspiration. While on the Black Parade World Tour, the band would come out in their uniforms, perform the entire album front to back. Then they would go into the back, take a little break, change into their usual garb, and perform some songs off of their previous albums. Now, I personally went to that tour, and it was incredible. Seriously, one of the best performances I've ever seen, and I've been to a lot of concerts. And it was so cheap. Do you guys remember when concert tickets were affordable and accessible? Those were the days. There were a couple of singles released from this album, like Teenagers, Famous Last Words, but none of those singles are as iconic as Welcome to the Black Parade. Even 20 years later, the first note of that piano can drop any emo to their knees. Needless to say, the album was an instant classic, coming in at number 2 on the Billboard 200 charts, as well as on the UK charts. Albumoftheyear.org gives it a 74 critic score and an 89 user score. MCR's last official record as of this recording is Danger Days, The True Lives of the Fabulous Killjoys, which was released in November 2010. The band had taken a few years off between Parade and Danger Days for their personal lives. Many of the members got married and started families, and in Bob Brier's case, he and the band split ways just before the recording for no official reason. But if you Google his name, a laundry list of controversies can be found. And let's just say it was probably for the best to part ways, yeah. Recorded in Calabasas, California, and produced by Rob Cavallo, Danger Days is yet another great confirmed concept album by the band. However, the aesthetic shift from Parade to Danger Days could not be any more extreme, possibly leading to its low review scores on albumoftheyear.org. Critics rate it 69, while the fans gave it a 68. The album hit number 8 on the Billboard 200 charts, and besides being a concept album, it could not be any more different from the previous work the band released. Gone were the dreary sepia tones and black military-style uniforms of the Black Parade, replaced instead with bright colors and loud songs. Danger Days even features a narrator throughout the album to walk us through the story via radio DJ-esque updates. There are also companion comic books to the album, obviously penned and inked by Gerard Way. Danger Days is a rock opera. The album's storyline takes place in the post-apocalyptic California in 2019, where a group of rebellious outsiders known as the Killjoy battle against an evil corporation. Each band member got their own distinct character in this story, and they played out beats of the story in each music videos released. I did love Danger Days when it came out, and I still think it's a bop to this day. I don't care if that's controversial. In promotion for the album, the band went on the World Contamination Tour. It lasted from October 2010 to February 2012 and covered North America, Europe, Asia, and Oceania. They also went on a 10th anniversary Honda Civic tour with Blink-182. Following these official albums, MCR continued to release B-sides and single compilation albums like Conventional Weapons and The Mad Gear and Missile Kid, all of which you can look up on your own. We do not have time to get into the weeds of all of that. In terms of official albums, however, the drip stopped in 2010 with Danger Days, and in March 2013, the band went on an official hiatus. Now, the band members certainly didn't stay idle during this break. Along with their growing personal lives, Gerard, Mikey, Ray, and Frank have all taken on their own side projects as well. Starting with Mikey Way, besides a marriage to his first wife, divorce, marriage to his second wife, and 2 children, a serious struggle with mental health and addiction, Mikey Way spent the better part of the 2010s working on his side project called Electric Century. The band consists of him and David Debiak and was best described as electronic pop, being compared to other bands of the time like Fun and 21 Pilots. Along with a ton of singles and EPs, their debut album, For the Night to Control, was released July 2017. Their self-titled second album was produced by Ray Toro and released in February 2021. Besides that, he collaborated with a bunch of bands and artists like Good Charlotte, Andy Black, and Waterparks. Moving on to Frank Iero. Now, one thing about Frank is he is gonna play music. This guy is pathological with his bands at this point, and who could blame him? If you recall, he's been in bands since he was 11 years old, so it's no surprise that between 2007 and now, he has been a handful of bands and solo side projects like Leathermouth, The Love Cats, which is a Cure cover band, Death Spells, Frank Iero and the Celebration, Frank Iero and the Superviolence, Frank Iero and the Patients, and his most recent band, LS Dunes, all of which are various forms of punk, hardcore, emo, etc. He also co-founded a record company with his wife called Skeleton Crew, but he ultimately decided to leave it in December 2010 to focus on MCR's Danger Days, as well as his growing family. Frank has a wife and 2 kids. Ray Toro was married in 2008 and has 2 kids as well. During the 2010s, Ray worked on a solo song called Isn't That Something, which was completely his own creation. Lyrics, guitar, drums, production, all of it was done in his own home. Later, he went on to release his debut solo album called Remember the Laughter in 2016. He's also collaborated with Voltaire on his 10th album, Raised by Bats, and with Reggie and the Full Effect on the album No Country for Old Musicians. And finally, Gerard Way. This man was honestly born for greatness. He proved one way or another he was going to be a household name, and there was no time like the 2010s for him to have shown that proof. First, he was married to his wife, Lindsay, a member of the rock band Mindless Self-Indulgence. They have 1 child together. During the break, Gerard took on a solo project of his own, releasing his debut album, Hesitant Alien, in September 2014 and playing some shows to promote it. It was the only album of his solo endeavor, but he did release plenty of additional singles, including Baby, You're a Haunted House, collaborating with his brother Mikey Way, and Getting Down the Germs, collabing with MCR bandmate Ray Toro. Outside of music, Gerard was blowing up in many other ways. Biggest of all were his comic series. Of course, he'd had a very successful run with the Fabulous Killjoys, but it was actually the Umbrella Academy that shot to Netflix stardom in 2019. It was based on the comic series by Gerard Way and Gabriel Ba. Aside from writing the source material for the show itself, Gerard was co-producer and had a heavy hand in the music on the show as well, even playing a few covers that were featured on the episodes. Other writing credits were as follows: Aquabat Super Show in 2013, 2014 Marvel's Edge of the Spider-Verse, where he co-created character Penny Parker. That is a character that later showed up on Into the Spider-Verse, an amazing movie. Gerard stays booked and busy, don't you worry about it. So where are they now? I have no idea. Probably LA, I don't know, at home, relaxing. But the band is back and better than ever. In 2019, MCR made the announcement that they would be returning to the stage for a world tour in 2020. And we all know what happened in 2020, don't we? That tour was postponed, and instead they went on the tour in 2022. They also released a new single called The Foundations of Decay, which fans speculate is a big indicator of a new album to come. Of course, every couple of months on Twitter or Tumblr, someone comes up with new MCR 5 rumors to rile up the fan base. But for now, all is quiet on the MCR front. The band is set to play When We Were Young Fest in 2024, which will be their 2nd time playing the Nostalgia Fest. The first time they did it in costumes from the Revenge era with old people makeup and prosthetics. It was a little jab at nostalgia culture as a whole. I am looking forward to seeing what stunts they're going to pull this year, though, from my bed in Orlando, because your girl didn't get tickets. Maybe I'll find a way to get there, but until then, that's MCR in a nutshell. For the final portion of this video, I like to call this section fan quotes and anecdotes. This is the part where in the future, I'm hoping to do more of an interview style with fans of the bands that I cover here. Just a casual little sit-down conversation about what the band means to you, why it's so important to you, how do you feel about them now. If that sounds like something that you might be into, please feel free to comment below or DM me on Instagram at ShoddyContent, and I will see where I can fit you in. But for this episode, I sent out questions to a couple MCR fans, but it was one fan in particular that I really enjoyed their response, so I will read that out now. This is from Joe. Quote, I haven't always been a My Chem fan, but they've always kind of been in my peripheral. They toured with a lot of bands I really loved, so it was repeated exposure for sure. I love them more now than I did when I was younger. I do have a My Chem tattoo now. But I also really feel like you have to hear a band at the right time to fall in love with them. And that didn't happen for me until Danger Days. The first time I heard them at all was the first time I saw them live. It was December 2002, and they were opening for Taking Back Sunday. I did actually mention them in a live journal update at the time, and the direct quote is, quote, the band screams too much for me, which actually totally checks out because I still don't like Bullets at all. My favorites are Danger Days, which I loved from the first time I heard it, and Three Cheers, which grew on me many years later. I wasn't super into them when they were really blowing up, and even now I feel much more on the outskirts of the fandom, though I definitely watch live streams of almost every night of the tour because I still can't believe they're back. Danger Days is such a sentimental favorite of mine because I ended up driving across the country with my best friend at the time from Boston to Los Angeles, and it was the only thing we listened to the whole way for almost 10 days. It was the soundtrack to this really cool adventure since I'd never done anything like that before, and I can't listen to the album without thinking about all the crazy stuff that happened along the way. Second personal story for bonus content. At Warped Tour 2005, I got to watch Patrick Stump play drums on Thank You for the Venom. There's like one photo of this in existence, and I knew it was something super special when it happened, and I am begging for a repeat at When We Were Young. As for myself, I got into MCR back in 2004. I saw the I'm Not Okay music video on one of the MTV after-school rock blocks, and I was immediately hooked. Absolutely everything about their weird, dark, twisted little aesthetic was appealing to my developing 14-year-old brain. I remember seeing them on Warped Tour 2005 and nearly dying of heat stroke. I paid $5 on PhotoBucket to recover these pictures, so you're going to sit there and enjoy them in all of their blurry digicam glory. I even waited outside of their tour bus for a cringy amount of time to meet Frankie and Bob. A friend of mine stayed behind a little longer and met Gerard when he eventually came out of the bus. I think if I wanted to meet Mikey, I should have been waiting outside the Fall Out Boy bus. Anyway, from there, I remember seeing them on the Black Parade tour, one of the best shows of my life. Most recently, I saw them in Dover, Delaware at Firefly Fest in 2022, where Gerard performed wearing this, and I'm in love all over again. All of the outfits on this latest tour were chef's kiss, seriously. It's hard to describe what this band means to me. I've fallen off their wagon in more recent years, not really keeping up too much with the goings-on in their bandom, but they were so formative to me that it's hard not to at least keep an ear out for the big announcements. They're a band born out of trauma and heartbreak and anger and fear. They set out to change the world, and in my opinion, they really have. Back in the early 2000s, emo was really misunderstood, and bands like MCR gave space to a group of kids that often felt alone, bullied, and misunderstood. It's hard to understand if you've never felt that way, but in the end, what matters is their long-lasting legacy and the lives of every single fan that they've touched. Every fan that's ever been moved by their performance, a Gerard monologue, their lyrics, or their message. It's told time and time again in countless testimonies, quotes, and blog posts. And most of all, the posters held up at every single My Chemical Romance show. MCR saved my life.